And I would like to have each of the commission members introduce themselves as I recognize them. Ted?
Ted Gambogi.
Tom? Tom, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tom Hutcherson.
George?
George Lee.
Stan?
Yes, Stan Goligoski.
Butch?
Butch Tracy.
And last but not least, Greg.
Greg Lozelle.
All righty. I don't know if we have any council members attending on this or not. Staff members will introduce themselves during their part of the presentation. This is an open public hearing and is being taped, recorded, and videotaped by the city. The proceedings are being televised by representatives of the public media, the public, local cable and/or radio stations, and may also be rebroadcast. The numbers of commissioners present is 7. It will require 4 votes for a majority. As most of the members, I guess, as everybody is attending this meeting remotely, all parties wishing to be heard, including the commission members, are asked to state their name prior to speaking in order to ensure accurate minutes. Members of the public should also give their address when they introduce themselves. Then our first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 30th, 2020 minutes. Are there any corrections? Hearing no.
If not, I move that we approve the minutes as written. This is Ted Gambogi.
We have a motion to approve.
George Lee will second.
And George seconded. All right.
Okay. This is Kaylee Nunez. I will now take a vote. Let's see. Ted Gambogi,
Yes.
George Lee,
Yes.
Thomas Hutchison,
Yes.
Stan Goligoski,
Yes.
Butch Tracy,
Yes.
Greg Lozelle,
Yes.
Don Michaelman.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Second item on the agenda, is Site 20-004, site plan review for Phase 1 of the Grande Vita development to include an integrated aging in place facility that will provide independent living units, assisted living units, and memory care on approximately 8.96 acre parcel. Zoning is business regional. Property owners, F Properties LLC, Burrow Creek LLC, Royco Properties LLC. The applicant is J. Brown-Kevin B. Howard Architects. At the site is APN 103-15-160A and 103-15-165. Location is northwest corner of East Robin Drive and State Route 69. Staff?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. Tammy DeWitt, Community Planner, the City of Prescott. Basically, this is an overall site plan review that will consist, the Phase 1 will consist of an independent living, assisted living, memory care. The overall project will have a hotel and business offices or medical offices over the 8.96 acres. Phase 1 is the proposed 3-story independent living, assisted living, and memory care facility consisting of 134 beds and related services. The future Phase 2, they're proposing medical offices, and Phase 3 will be a hotel, and these will be market driven as to when they will be developed. Here's the subject property. Here we have, this is County Diamond Valley area. There's 2 parcels here. We have this big parcel and this little sliver here. This is State Route 69 through here. It is zoned business regional. It was rezoned many years ago. but nothing's been come forward to be developed on the parcel till now. Here's a close-up of it. As you can see, that this is county area and this is the city boundary. And we have the two parcels here. They will need to be combined through an administrative land combination before starting development. Here's the overall imagery of the property. It is currently vacant. We have gotten some questions from the residents in the neighborhood that this area here has been used by some of the residents for parking when this gets very slick. That's something that I told them they need to talk with the property owners about when this gets developed to see if that's still something they might be able to do. But the parking for the project is for the development, but that's something that we said they need to address with the property owners in the future. Here's some pictures. This is looking from State Route 69 up at the property. There is a significant change in elevation. The property will be leveled, so we'll see some terracing, and the project will be much lower than the houses adjacent to it. And then here's another view. This is Robin Drive and 69 down here. And then this will all be cut down for the development. Here's the overall site plan. We have State Route 69 here, and we have Robin Drive right here. Here's what we're looking at right now is the phase 1 development. We will have significant landscaping around the buffer. This is in a commercial corridor overlay due to it's adjacent to the highway. Basically, the overlay provides additional development criteria to promote quality commercial development that's compatible with surrounding natural areas and developed residential neighborhoods. So with this terracing and the additional buffering, it does meet those requirements. The colors that are being proposed meet the color requirements within that commercial corridor. Also per our code, because this is commercial right adjacent to residences, even though these are zoned business regional, they are single family residences. There is the additional landscaping and buffer that is being proposed along here against these residences that do meet those requirements. So the overall site plan, the parking, proposed parking, and the landscaping and screening meet all our code requirements. This is their landscape phasing plan. Phase 1, which is what we're looking at now, will have to incorporate all that landscaping and buffering requirements. Then we have the future phase 2 here and the phase 3 future hotel here. This is Robin Drive here, and this is State Route 69. So these are provided by the applicant. It's a bird's eye view from the property line, what it could look like. State Route 69 is out here. So, and then this is what it'll look like from the bird's eye. As I said, the colors match what's required for the commercial corridor and everything else. Here's a view from 69, looking at the front of the building. Oops, sorry. And here's another close-up picture of what the main entry they're proposing it to look like. Here's the elevations that were provided. As you can see, this is the natural grade right here line. So that you can see that the property will be significantly cut to be leveled for the development. And then here's the west elevations. These were provided in your packet. And then here's the north elevation. And then this is the east elevation. As you can see, the residences up above, they're going to see this, the top of this. And then there's going to be trees and screening along here to kind of buffer this. All the uses are allowed, are being proposed in the business regional zoning district, so there's no rezoning required, and the site plan meets all our land development code requirements. They are going to need to do a traffic impact analysis to be approved by Public Works and ADOT for their proposed right-hand turn lane off of 69. I'll go back. So they are proposing a right-hand turn lane access only off of 69 here. And then the two accesses here will have to be approved by Public Works. And this one will have to be approved by ADOT. And any improvements to that intersection will be part of that traffic impact analysis for the additional traffic. And then, as you saw, there's going to be a significant elevation change from the development to adjacent residential, and it will be heavily screened and landscaped, so to minimize the impact of what they can see of that building. The recommended motion, if you choose to, is to recommend approval of site plan for the Grande Vita Development Phase 1. And that concludes my presentation. I also have the applicant on the line if you have questions for him too.
Commissioners, you have any questions of staff and applicant?
Yeah, this is Tom Hutchison here. When I read through the packet, I felt like it was a good use of that property. But the question I found myself asking was, does the care facility stand alone without the office building? How do you administrate all that without the capability or the office facility to manage that? So if the applicant could explain that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. Evan B. Howard, architect, and I'll respond to that question. The offices are meant to be leased for doctors, dentists. It's going to be a medical use office building in the future. All of the administrative needs for the facility itself as Phase 1 are included inside the building program. So all the administrators, nurses, caregivers, all of that administration is self-contained within the design of the building.
Kevin, could you also give your business address?
You bet. We are at 8339 North Oracle Road in Oro Valley, Arizona.
Thank you. Other commissioners?
Yeah, this is Ted Gambogi. I have two questions. I drove by the property. That's going to be an awfully big cut. How tall is the retaining wall going to be? And my second question is, since the hotel is Phase 3 and that's what people see from Robin Road, what are plans to landscape until the hotel is under construction?
Sure. To answer the landscape question, we are basically, if you go back to the landscape, so we are landscaping the entire perimeter around the two future phases, Phase 2 and Phase 3. If you look along Robin Drive, we are landscaping that entire strip. So the property will be fully landscaped and developed except for the parking strips right in front of the hotel.
So where I see yellow will be landscaping until the hotel is under construction.
See blue, there's a little bit of fuzzy area in the graphic along Robin Drive. That whole strip between Robin Drive and the future parking for the hotel will be. All of this landscaping in place along the edge of Robin Drive will all be in place. We won't be landscaping on the hotel future pad itself, but we'll be landscaping the entire perimeter of that pad.
And the height of the retaining wall?
Varies. So in the back, using your cursor to show the back, in the back where you see the multi-tiers, we have maximized the allowable cut for that back area. It was our intention to get what was potentially a 3-story facility to look just like a 1-story facility backed by the residences. And so we did maximize the allowable cut per this graphic, but we stair-stepped it with planting strips so it'll look attractive. And then we minimize along the highway. Along the highway, you see a detail 3. That is at its highest point. It varies along the highway from very little to this maximum, and it'll be a double step with trees and landscaping.
And I'm looking for a number.
So the numbers are on these two, and both these dimensions are a worst case scenario. It varies, and we're showing the worst case. So we have 36 foot at the worst spot on the back cut, and we have about 15 feet along the street, along the highway at the worst spot. And it tapers and gets less from there.
Okay, thank you.
One quick question to follow up on Ted's thing there. So the pads for the office and the hotel are just going to be dirt?
They're going to be graded, compacted soil, yes.
Okay.
But the perimeter of those pads on all four sides will be landscaped in phase one.
Other questions, commissioners? I have a couple quick questions myself. The lighting is going to be, night sky is going to be applicable to the lighting for the site. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And the other question has more of a curiosity question. When I was out there and looking at the property, I saw two white pipes sticking up out of the ground in the middle there. Do we know what they're for? Is there something underneath there or what?
I'm not certain what you're referring to, so I couldn't answer your question. I could look into that.
Just
Yeah,
curiosity.
we don't know.
Hi, this is Greg Lozelle. I have a question for staff. Tie-in of sewer and water. Is there already something on that easement along 69, or is it got to be brought in that way?
It's going to have to be brought in from the closest connection. They may have to get some easements from adjacent property owners, but they are working on that now, but it will have to be brought to the property.
And is that the cost of the city or the applicant?
The applicant.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Kevin Howard again, so I can give you some basic intelligence on where we are on that. So the property across the street that has utility access is owned by the bank, by a bank. And my client developer group are in negotiations with the bank to either purchase an easement for the water sewer or to actually purchase those 14 acres themselves so they can have access to water and then resell the property, or perhaps develop future casitas that would be an expansion of the campus for the basic idea. So that is actually something ongoing right now with my client group, and it is quite frankly one of the property and why it hadn't been developed in the past. But my clients are very motivated, and they'll either reach an agreement with the bank or they'll buy the property, either or.
Other questions? Tammy, do we have anybody from the public that wants to make any comments?
So if there's anybody on the call that wants to speak to this item, on the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a raised hand. If you want to talk on this item, please hit that. Okay, I see one. Kathy, you need to unmute yourself.
Done. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Kathleen O'Boyle, and I obviously reside here in Diamond Valley. A couple questions. How will this impact the property values? And number two, this property still is in the Diamond Valley region. Will the people of Diamond Valley be able to connect with the city sewer and water then?
So in regards to the property values, it is already zoned business regional. So this is allowed use. So we can't address the property values in that area because this is an allowed use. In regards to connecting up to the sewer and water, that's a question for our Public Works Department, if they will have the capacity and what would be required if, with you being not in the city limits, to connect up. That would not be something that this developer would be required to do.
Okay, and I do have a third question about the memory unit. How are they going to keep these clientele safe, and what stage of memory loss are they going to accept?
I will defer that to the applicant if they can address those. Jay, you're muted. Jay, you're muted.
Okay, I'm now unmuted. This is Kevin Howard, architect. So in answer to the question on the memory care in the residence there's essentially just 28 memory care units, and they're part of our overall campus to maintain our clients' mode of operation, which is aging. So nice to be there, and then they can age in place. There's only 28 units that are memory care, and those units are placed at the ground floor on the east side of the facility. And each of the entrance and exit locations are going to be digitally monitored. We're going to have a very sophisticated tracking and digital system in place to allow those doors to remain locked, but in case of fire, they open. And so great care is being taken to keep the memory care residents safe. We also have private gardens and atriums that they can flow into and not go out beyond the confines of the facility. So there are places where they can go outside without escaping, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions, Kathy?
Oh, probably, but not right now.
Okay, feel free to email me if you have our department if you have any other questions.
I will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else, Tammy?
Okay, is there anyone else? I don't see anybody else that raised their hand to speak.
All right. Any further questions from the commissioners? Do I hear a motion concerning this?
Yeah, Tom Hutchison, I move to approve.
All right, there's a,
This is Greg Lozelle. I second.
okay. All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call for the vote then, Kaylee.
Okay. All right. Ted Gambogi,
Yes.
George Lee,
Yes.
Thomas Hutchison,
Yes.
Stan Goligoski,
Yes.
Butch Tracy,
Yes.
Greg Lozelle,
Yes.
Don Michaelman.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Next up on the
Okay.
agenda, whoops.
Just give us a minute to transition here.
Yeah, we're going to wait a little bit, about 5 minutes till we can get set up for the next item there.
We're going to sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate your input.
Tammy, let me know when you're ready.
I'm trying to, let's see, we have Steve Ice. We have, I think we had Doug. Let's see. Doug
Craig.
Nielsen, Craig Passy,
Yes, so
and Steve.
Steve and Craig will represent Banner and Smith Group Architects.
Is Paula Burr supposed to be a panelist? No. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Did you? Okay. Yeah, I put her to an attendee. So I think I have everybody.
Want to continue now, George?
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready, sir.
Okay. Next on the agenda is SUP 20-002, special use permit to allow a portion of the proposed Banner Hospital building to be up to 75 feet in height, where zoning district height allowance is 50 feet. Property location is 3835 Willow Creek Road. Zoning now is BGPAD, Business General Planned Area Development. Property owner is Prescott Whispering Rock LLC. The applicant agent is Banner Health. The APN is 106-02-398, encompassing 20.82 acres. George?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick corrections. The zoning for the property is business regional. So I apologize if some of the documentation may not be accurate on that. It was rezoned approximately 6 months ago, a little over that. The purpose of the rezoning was to allow for the medical uses that were originally intended for the property, many of which require additional steps or processes, in some cases like this with a special use permit. So for a brief update on what a special use permit process is and why we are before you today, a couple of points, mainly for the public. I think commissioners are well aware of the processes. Business regional zoning allows a building height of up to 100 feet. That's 100 feet. Anything beyond 50 feet requires a special review, the special use permit process, in order to reach that additional height. So the proposed SUP before you today, the special use permit request for Banner Hospital, is to allow building up to 75 feet in height. So this is not 75 feet beyond the existing allowed 50, which they could do without the special use permit. It's a total of 75 feet. The applicants have requested a max of 75 feet to allow for some deviation that can occur during construction. The actual building plans that you'll see as we go through the presentation will in fact show their proposal is for a building height of 71 feet, but there are some variabilities that can occur during construction which might affect that overall height. So again, maximum proposed height is 71. Maximum requested to give them flexibility is 75. The SUP is not a variance. The 100-foot height is allowed. It's just subject to an additional review through this process by Planning Commission and City Council. Only the patient wing is proposed to exceed the 50 feet, which would not require an SUP. So the building placement on the site, as we'll show you, was done by Banner's architects, and that's the Smith Group, who you'll hear from momentarily, primarily with the intent of placing the hospital in a functional location, but also avoiding impacts to view sheds. So we will hopefully alleviate some of the concerns that nearby property owners have expressed about impacts to the view of the Dells rock outcroppings that are to the east of this site. So the site that's proposed is located in the middle of and occupying the largest single parcel in Whispering Rock subdivision. This was a commercial subdivision was annexed into the city with the intention of commercial zoning and medically related commercial development. So the hospital will become an anchor, so to speak, for other uses within the subdivision. As you can see, I'm going to point out the Dells rock outcroppings. The highest point of rocks are these. These are the most visible to nearby property owners. This is the Pinion Oaks neighborhood. These are the closest residential properties to the site and the ones that we have the most concern about and from. So we're looking at this rock outcropping and this neighborhood and its the impacts of the development on that neighborhood. So just from a street level view, and this is a photo taken before all of the infrastructure construction that's now underway out here, showing generally the location of the hospital site, with its site layout being in 2 steps. And I'll go back and talk about phasing in just a moment. The patient wing is the northernmost piece of the hospital. The primary hospital function, all of the regular medical facilities you associate with a hospital, are in the section south of that wing and further from the neighborhood. This section will remain roughly at 50 feet or below. So the SUP does not affect the main hospital. It only affects the patient wing in the upper area. In fact, the development phasing will start with the health center, which is the smaller building at the very front southwest side of the property. So this will be phase 1. Phase 2 will be the hospital and the lower level of the patient wing. And then phase 3 would be an upper level and an extension of the patient wing that will reach the 71 feet in height. We did some analysis, because we have so many concerns about impacts on nearby properties, we did some analysis of viewshed impacts, and we used 2 things in particular. One was the site plan I just showed you, and again, roughly the approximate center of the Banner Hospital is here. And then we picked a point that's below the highest level of the rocks and did an analysis of how the hospital placement would impact views of these rocks, specifically that location. I'm going to show you a couple of things that are top-down views, but the Smith Group presentation actually has some better information about impacts on height of the hospital and the vertical, and we're going to let them share their presentation with you in just a moment. So again, what we did was pick this location. This is the area slightly lower than the top of the rock outcropping. And we looked back in the direction of Pinion Oaks and westward across the street to see what kind of impacts we would have. What this shows is in green, these are properties that can see that location. That's an unobstructed view of that point of rocks from all of the areas indicated in green. The areas not covered in green have some form of obstruction that may or may not impair their view. In some cases, it's vegetation. You can look around the vegetation and see it. In other cases, it may be walls or other buildings. Then we took the prospective second phase of development, which is the hospital and the lower level patient wing, which will be at or below 50 feet, and did a similar analysis. And it's a little hard to picture back and forth between the two, but the areas that are impacted by a 50-foot building are no different than the areas impacted by no building. So this will not obstruct the views of that particular point of the rocks, and again, not the highest point, a lower level point, from any of the areas highlighted in green, which already have a view of that area. And then we went in and looked at the third phase of development with the 71-foot section of the wing going in place here. And again, the impacts to those areas are almost identical. So everything in green has a view now and will still have a view of that point after the hospital construction. Now, one thing to keep in mind before we go on to the Smith Group and their presentation is that all of these views will now contain a hospital where there is no hospital. So you will see a building, but it will not obstruct the view of most of the Granite Dells rock outcropping that is immediately to the east of the Banner site. I would like at this time to turn it over to the Smith Group for them to share their screen with us. And
George,
sir?
George, this is Ted Gambogi. Before you do, I have a question.
Okay.
Emery Riddle just recently built a tall building. Do you know the height of that building?
I do not know the height of that building. I apologize.
Okay, now let's hear from the Smith Group.
Okay. So I stop and I approve him sharing.
Yes.
All right. Craig, you should be able to share your screen and unmute yourself.
George, this is Steve Ice with Banner Health. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Good. Before Smith Group kicks things off, I just wanted to say a few words. I just want to say good morning to the chairman, members of the commission, and members of the community. And I think on behalf of Banner Health, we're excited to bring our not-for-profit healthcare mission of making healthcare easier so life can be better. I think from a project perspective, we're very excited about this project in the future. We are currently working with Dr. Ascari and team to finalize our land sale. And after that would be in the process of starting to look at community needs, community development, and understanding of what our planning looks like in the future for this medical campus to meet the community needs of the city of Prescott. We do understand some of the concerns related to the height of the building, and I'm going to turn it over to Craig and our architectural team. But I think what you'll see is we've been very thoughtful in how we plan the building to mitigate as many of those height concerns as possible.
Thanks, Steve. George, are you able to hear?
We can hear you fine. Thank you. Go ahead.
George, you're able to see my screen as well, right?
Yes, you're on the screen, so please proceed.
Yeah, we have the addressing your concerns screen up.
And Craig, we can't hear you.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. There's not terrible feedback, is there?
No.
No, you're coming in loud and clear.
Apologize for that. So what I'd like to do here is really start by identifying kind of the three themes of concerns that we heard from community members. The first one being, the obvious question of why does the hospital need to be 75 feet in height? The second one that we heard was, isn't there a strategy that would allow the hospital to be more horizontal than vertical? And third, probably the most important, and understandably so, there was a lot of concerns raised about the views of amazing Granite Dells, the east subdivision being constructed by the hospital. And so, again, we put together just a very brief presentation to kind of walk through these items. So to the first point or first question about the 75 in height, it's probably important to kind of start with the general organization of the hospital. On the right of the screen is the diagnostic and treatment portion of the hospital.
Hey, Craig, this is Ted Gambogi. Could you move a little closer to the speaker?
Yes, I apologize. Does that work better?
Yes, you're coming in clear.
Okay. So again, to the right of the screen is the diagnostic and treatment portion of the hospital, which will house emergency department, surgery, imaging department. To the left of the screen is the patient floors, of which we've proposed 4 floors. And that's designed to be able to support the anticipated need in the community of ultimately 156 beds. What's probably important to note, and George had alluded to it, is that there's a very small portion of the proposed hospital that actually breaches the 50 feet that's allowed under the current zoning. So this is a blow up of the patient floors themselves. Again, you'll see that a very small portion of that patient floors actually exceeds the 50 feet allowable height. So the reasoning for that additional height is to be able to accommodate the overhead infrastructure of the patient floors, as well as for screening of rooftop equipment, which is actually a requirement of the city of Prescott. So to my point about the limited amount of area of the hospital that actually breaches the hospital, this is a plan which illustrates to the bottom left-hand corner a proposed health center, which will be roughly 16 feet in height. And then to the right is the hospital proper, which is made up of varying heights of building elements. But what you'll see that's shaded in blue is that 73% of the total building actually falls below the 50-foot allowed under the current zoning. The patient floors, which we were looking at, that building height is at 60 feet. That represents 27% total footprint. And then as we look at, again, the required screening of mechanical equipment, elevator overruns, that extend to 71 feet, why we're requesting the 75 feet, again, as George had mentioned, account for some potential variances in site and construction, really represents only 10% of the overall proposed hospital. The second question that we wanted to address again was why it wasn't why it could be more horizontal than vertical. So the design of hospitals are very deliberate. The layout of hospitals are driven by adjacencies of departments and services, and increasing building footprint would only increase travel distances, create operational challenges, and ultimately compromise patient safety. There's ways that hospitals are designed and planned, either as a approach where all elements of the hospital are stacked. I talked about the diagnostic functions that house the emergency department, surgery. In a bundled approach, you would have patient floors stacked on top of that diagnostic and treatment portion of the hospital. The other planning strategy that hospitals be planned and designed under is what's called an unbundled approach, in which case you take the patient floors and you pull them off of the top of the diagnostic and treatment functions, thereby reducing overall building height. That's in effect what it is that Banner has done here. They've done deliberately as a means of maintaining a lower density, lower scale on the site. As I mentioned, the hospital has been designed to ultimately be able to accommodate 156 beds. And because of those adjacencies, there's limitation on how large of a floor plate a patient floor can be. But again, in keeping with trying to maintain a lower scale on the campus, rather than stacking all of the patient floors for both the first phase and the future phase, see in this exhibit that we've identified phase 3, which is future patient floor, patient bed expansion, which would get them to the 156 bed, is actually occurring horizontally versus vertically. And then finally, I think probably the $1 question about where this hospital is going to impede views, specifically from the Pinion Oaks. Kind of give you some reference on looking at a portion is larger mass site plan. Left, see various residential properties. And then to the right is the proposed site with the hospital being represented. And what we've done is the red line represents a section cut through that entire site from the westmost portion of the Pinion Oaks property all the way to the highest of the Granite Dells peaks. And at the very bottom, in dark black, you will see the profile, that section cut. And so what's important to note here is that the vast majority of Pinion Oaks, the existing grades, so the finished floors of the residential area sits at 5,180 feet, and it drops down to about 5,160 feet as it tails to the east. The street, Willow Creek Road, is at 5,120, roughly 40 to 60 feet actually lower than the finished floor elevation of the residential area. And that's about consistent with the finished floor elevation of the proposed hospital. So at the very bottom of the screen, what you'll see is the lower dashed line represents the 5,180 feet finished floor elevations of the residential area, as compared to the height of the tallest part of hospital, which is again 71 feet above our grade, which is really only 11 feet above the proposed residential area. And then trail off to the right, you'll see that the lower dell is at 5,260 feet, which is roughly 80 feet above the finished floor elevation of the residential development area, and 80 feet above the highest point of our proposed hospital. So this just is a summary of those grading elevations. Again, the Pinion Oaks residential area, the finished floor grade elevations range from 5,160 to 5,180. The full finished floor is actually at 5,120, which again ranges anywhere from 40 to 60 feet lower than the finished floor of the residential area. And then as we track through the various elements of the hospital, most of which again are well within the allowed 50 feet, they're still well below the finished floor elevation of the Pinion Oaks area. And it's really not we get to the top of the patient floors and the screen wall for the mechanical equipment do we start to breach the finished floor elevation of the residential area by 11 feet. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Ice.
So I think we are open to any questions from chairman and members of the commission or the community.
Before we go to, this is Don Michaelman, before we go to questions there, could we have an official introduction of you all by the full name and your business location for the records?
Yes, this is Steve Ice. I'm the Executive Director of Facilities Development for Banner Health, and I work in our corporate offices in Phoenix.
And Craig?
Yeah, so it's Craig Passy. I'm an architect and I'm the healthcare studio leader with Smith. I'm located at 455 North 3rd Street in Phoenix, Arizona.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Yes, this is George Lee.
Yes, George.
I don't know whether it's Steve or Craig that I need to talk to, but could we go back to the elevation of the hospital showing the floors, the height of each floor? I think it was like your second slide.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the, was it this one, George?
That one right there. That one right there. Okay, my question is this. Why are levels 3 and 4 significantly higher than the patient floors on 1 and 2?
George, are you referring to higher as in overall building height, or are you referring to the height of the individual floors themselves?
The height of the individual floors themselves. It appears that the first and second floor are much lower than the third and fourth floor.
Yeah, and so George, it's probably the because of wider the second floor is, it probably appears to look like it's shallower. The reality is that the second, third, and fourth floor are actually all the same height. The first floor is actually taller than the patient floors above because they align with the emergency department on the and the imaging department on the first floor. That's part of the two-story structure because there's significantly more overhead infrastructure to be able to support the imaging equipment, overhead booms, those types of things. So in fact, the second, third, and fourth floors are all the same height.
Okay, I guess that answers my question. I thought there was a significant difference between the ceiling heights of floor 1 and 2 versus 3 and 4. I guess I'm incorrect in that assumption.
Yeah, I could understand how you would have arrived at that conclusion based on the width of it. It makes it appear that it's actually much shallower.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, this is Stan Goligoski. I've got a question for the architects. So if you were to reduce the patient buildings by 1 floor, would you still be under the 50-foot allowable height with the mechanical area on top? And if so, how many beds would that reduce you to?
So let me see here.
Yeah, I think, Craig, this is Steve. We would still be over the 50 feet if we took a floor off. Taking a floor off would roughly reduce the building by 14 feet, which would still put us at about 57 feet to the top of the mechanical screen walls. And we would lose 36 potential beds in the future.
Okay, so what you're saying is you'd have 130 beds per building, right?
It'd be,
or is that 130 total?
No, it'd be, I think we're planning this at 156 and it would reduce down to 120.
120, that's right, 120 total, right?
Correct. With all 3 phases built.
Gotcha. Okay, that's my questions.
So Tom Hutchison here. So following on Stan's question, really you haven't got 2 floors. You've really only got 1 floor of patient. If in fact you exceed at 57 feet, eliminating the 3rd floor and the mechanicals.
Well, if we eliminated one of the floors, it wouldn't eliminate the mechanical space. The mechanical space would just drop down.
And that would put you at 57 feet. Is that what I understood?
That is correct.
So,
But it would ultimately result in a loss of 52
Another-
beds.
62 beds. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is Greg Lozelle. I have a question. George, can you give us, give me a history, or the new council, of the new commissioners, the history of this annexation and then the zoning? When and how did that occur?
So the annexation occurred about 2 years ago. Its intention was to annex property into the city, zone commercial, for the purpose of a commercial, primarily focused on medical subdivision. So the subdivision plat then came in after that annexation occurred, and the subdivision plat included a number of parcels for various uses, all basically related to either a hospital or medical office facility or rehabilitation facilities for post-surgeries, things like that. That was, there was a negotiation and a development agreement associated with that annexation. The intent was to have medical uses and commercial uses on the property. So what is being proposed now is an anchor that will lead to additional medical facilities on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, Tom Hutchison again. I want to circle back again. Question to the developer. Do you have a viable business plan if you're held to 50 feet? Does the hospital make sense?
It does not make sense.
Would it go forward then? It would not go forward. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't believe it would go forward from a patient care standpoint. I think we'd have to relook at a business strategy that didn't have inpatient care, which really makes our entire development most likely go away.
Okay, so for basically for 21 feet, the difference between 50 and 71, we're talking about having a hospital or not having a hospital. Is that kind of where I'm coming out?
Yeah, that's kind of where you're coming out. I think to Craig's point that he was making earlier, the only way for us to facilitate inpatient care at that point would be to go horizontal on the site, which would then impact our parking ratios, and it would also significantly impact the patient care component. We would wind up with patient care far away from our diagnostic and treatment care, which would lead to patient safety concerns. So that's why typically not only Banner Health is a developer, but most healthcare developers you'll see working in this vertical model where they work off of vertical circulation so that they can get patients up and down to critical areas quickly.
So the bottom line, I guess, is do you guys walk away if you don't get 75 feet?
I think that's where we would. I think that's where we would be, because I don't see how we would be viable to build a hospital under 50 feet tall.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is Stan Goligoski again. My question is in reference to the compatibility of the surrounding area. Could you go over again what the design or the color scheme, the landscaping, what are we talking about if you were to build in this location? How complementary would it be to the area? Is it going to be stark white, or what are we talking about here?
So Steve, I don't know if you want to take that. I certainly can start. So Banner Health obviously is a branded identity that if you've seen any of their facilities in the Valley or throughout the western half of the states. But that being said, their building materials that they use have the flexibility to be able to reflect the character of the local regional flavor. And so, while you might banner facilities here in the Valley that have a lighter color, I think the intent, as we look at Prescott, would be to try to match the surrounding granite rock or the granadelle or so earth tones, so that it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb. I think the intent to be able to be regionally appropriate.
Yeah, and this is Steve. I think to just add on to Greg's point, we have successfully done this in various regions, not only across the state of Arizona, but across some areas across the West. So as Craig mentioned, our Banner Health branded identity in the Phoenix market is this more cooler gray, whitish block pattern, which we know doesn't fit well in all locales. And we have successfully changed that model to a more earth tone model in not only the Western region and our Colorado markets. So we built a hospital a few years ago in Fort Collins where we regionalized that pattern. We did the same thing successfully with our tower expansion in the Tucson market. So we have multiple branded identities that can react to the region.
And for Commissioner Goligoski, the city of Prescott does have some very strong recommendations on use of earth tone colors for most developments along its major roadways, and this would certainly be one that would qualify in that regard, given the rock outcroppings adjacent.
And George, I think we take no issue with that design intent.
Excellent. Thanks, George. Thanks for your responses. Just want to make that part of public record too. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Other questions? This is Don Michaelman. I had a clarification question I have. Does the mechanicals need to be on top of the building, or can they be off to the side?
So the system that has been, so the short of it is yes. Relocate all of the equipment to ground mounted equipment would only further increase the floor to floor height of the building. So what's been proposed is the majority of your building equipment, cooling towers, and other things are located actually on the ground, screen wall to the northeast of the site. And so really the only equipment that is limited to the rooftop is air handling equipment, which again, for efficiency purposes and as a means of trying to maintain lower floor to floor heights and efficiency of operating systems, it's located on.
Okay. So if the mechanicals were moved off the side, the floors would increase more than the 11 feet the mechanicals take up on top of the roof?
Well, I'm not sure that there's actually a strategy that would allow you to relocate all of the equipment off the roof and off to the side. What's been designed right now, again, is trying to be sensitive to maintain a lower building profile, but also to be able to serve the HVAC needs of the facility.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners before we go to the public? Seeing none, do we have members of the public that want to speak to us?
Hi, this is Tammy, community planner. If there's anybody who would like to speak, please make sure you raise your hand and we will make sure to try to call on everybody. Everybody will be given 3 minutes and we'll let you know when that's about up. So first off, we have Gerald Winters. Hi, Gerald. You need to unmute yourself. Hi, Gerald. You need to unmute yourself if you want to speak. Okay.
Hello?
Gerald?
You there?
Yes. Gerald?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, I was looking at the map.
Gerald, excuse me, this is Don Michael. But before you start, introduce yourself and give your address, please. Sorry to interrupt you, but we need to have that for the record.
Okay. My name is Gerald Winters. I live at 1041 Hanicum Drive in Prescott in the Pinion Oak subdivision.
Thank you.
In looking at the map, it seems like the further south that the hospital gets moved, the least impact it'll have on the Pinion Oaks community. And it seems like the south side of the building has a lot of parking that could probably be relocated to the north side of the building. That's something that could be looked at.
Is that something that you want us to respond to?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So Gerald, thank you for your question. So the relation of parking is deliberate to the layout of the hospital itself. All of the parking to the south is primarily intended for staff. The parking to the west of the hospital is intended for patient and visitor parking. And so we were to shift the hospital to the south without then having to flip the building. All of the parking would be on the wrong side. It would all be on the patient floor side, which would create longer travel distances to get into the building.
And it just seems like that would resolve a lot of issues if we could move that further south. So,
Gerald, do you have any other questions?
This is Don Michael, and I'd like to follow up on that. Can you flip your layout there? Instead of having the office building on the southwest corner, you have it up on the northwest corner. And then just basically turn north to south and south to north. Is that a possibility? Craig?
Sorry. Go ahead, George.
I was just going to suggest if you could share your screen again and show us the site plan.
Yeah, of course. You should be able to see the site plan. So, the question about flipping the hospital and shifting it to the south, the obvious challenge that it creates is the proximity of the hospital now, the patient floor, to the health center. While the south portion of the site is wider and starts to taper as you go to the north, you kind of start to sufficient space to be able to flip it and have enough room around the hospital. The other issue that it starts to create is the alignment of the entry drive off of Willow Creek Road that is currently or proposed. It would create some challenges as well as with the grades on the site.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that this is Steve Ice. It's worth noting that you can see that we did purposefully locate the entryway off Willow Creek Road. One of the most important factors in the design of healthcare buildings is ease of access and ease of wayfinding. We have a lot of patients who come to us in times of stress, and you can see we specifically lined up the entrance where you have a straight shot directly into the main entrance of the hospital and the emergency department. So it's very intuitively approached by patients.
Okay, do we have other members of the public that want to speak on this matter?
At this time, we do not have any hands raised to speak. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this item? Please raise your hand. No, we do not have anybody else raising their hand, sir.
Are there any more questions from the commission members before we proceed?
This is George Lee. Could we go back to that last slide, please? Thank you. The question that I have is, if you leave the main hospital and the main entrance exactly where it is and take the patient's building, which is to the north, and move it down to the south, and then take your medical center and move it up to the northwest corner. Would that not work?
Yeah, good question. Again, the layout of the hospital is very different in the sense of the adjacencies of functions to each other. And you really can't just take that element and shift it to the south, because the relationships of spaces would not be right. You would have emergency department immediately adjacent to building support functions and other types of elements. Really, the only strategy that you could do would be to flip the entire building as it stands, and we've discussed the challenges associated with that, with the site and layout.
So what you're saying is that the functions inside the hospital portion of it, as they relate to the access to the patient care, is what's designed and cannot be changed.
Correct.
That's exactly it.
It's that vertical component we spoke of earlier, that we want the vertical connection from the patient tower to the diagnostic and treatment areas, being surgery and diagnostic imaging, not connected to the emergency department, which is what would happen in the scenario you're discussing.
Thank you very much. That makes sense.
This is Don Michaelman again. Just to clarify, basically you're saying the site layout, the way it is there with the dimensions of the site and so forth, prevent the 180 flip of the property by moving the health center up and just flipping the hospital over, that the site does not allow you to do that?
That is correct.
Yeah. And some of that is in reference just to the shape of the site. If the site were a perfect square, then flipping it makes sense. But with the shape of this particular site and how it starts to head east as it goes north, it wouldn't work for us from an access and parking standpoint.
Okay.
And Steve, maybe if I can just add, just as a side note, we spent a considerable amount of time trying to figure out the optimum location of the hospital on the site, not just to satisfy Banner's needs, but also to respect the impact that it potentially has on the community. We looked at flipping it, we looked at rotating it, shoving it in the northeast corner versus the southwest corner. And ultimately, the layout that's represented here seemed to be the most appealing compromise of all the solutions that we explored.
Okay. Commissioners, any further questions? If not, do we want to proceed with a motion concerning this?
We
Yes.
actually have one attendee who has her hand raised. So
good.
Bonnie Highsmith, I'm going to allow you to talk. Bonnie, you must unmute yourself.
Yes. Can
Hello.
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Bonnie Highsmith. I live at 915 Grapevine Lane in Pinion Oaks. My question is, can't we take a page from Yavapai Regional and build a parking garage, therefore leaving room to extend the footprint of Banner Hospital?
Craig, Steve?
This is Steve. I think there are a couple of issues as it relates to the parking garage scenario. Number one is it would help the effective parking ratio on the site, but as we stated earlier, spreading the building out wider from a patient care perspective doesn't help us from a patient safety perspective, because it moves patient care away from diagnostic services. And parking structures by nature are also pretty cost prohibitive from a business perspective.
Okay, disappointed to hear your answer.
Bonnie, do you have any other questions for the
No,
applicant?
no, I do not.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Tammy?
Does anyone else like to speak on this item? And I also would like to note, we do have 3 council members. We have Mayor Pro Tem Billy Orr, we have Council Member Shiska, and Council Member Roosing on the phone too. Just wanted to make note of that.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Don Michaelman. One last question. If you built this as, say, some of the hospitals down in Phoenix area where everything is straight up, what height would you be looking at to have the same facilities for beds and medical care? Just an estimate.
This is how we would build it in the Phoenix market also.
Okay.
And like Craig was stating earlier, it isn't a market-based strategy. It's a patient safety and patient satisfaction and efficiency strategy.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the commissioner? Any other public? Tammy?
No, sir, we don't have no hands raised.
All right. Do we want to proceed to make a motion concerning this?
This is Ted Gambogi. I move to recommend approval of SUP 20-002, a special use permit allowing building height of up to 75 feet.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Hutchison here, I second.
All right. We have a motion second. Any further discussion? If not, Kaylee, we can take a vote.
Hold on. This is Greg Lozelle.
Yes, Greg.
I have just, it's not any question. It's kind of more just a statement. You know, Prescott's going to grow, and it's just the way our model is, and it has been growing responsibly. When these folks bought their house in Pinion Oaks, Emerald Riddle was there. They knew that what they were going into. And I'm not against annexation or using people's land for what they want, but, you know, Banner knew what our restrictions were, and it just it doesn't seem fair to the residents that we would consider this height variance. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is George. Just for a quick clarification, the zoning district where Banner is proposing to locate allows 100-foot maximum height. It just requires a special review over 50. So it's not really a variance from the perspective of them having to show a hardship. It's more of a decision and review by Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council to make a determination that this is the best approach.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Any other further discussion before we take a vote?
You know, Tom Hutchison here again. I want to try to balance a little bit of inquiry and advocacy. I'm a strong advocate for views and outdoors and the beauty of Prescott. So I understand exactly, very, very well. I understand what the property owners are thinking about and what they'd like to achieve. On the other hand, I think about the growth of Prescott and the things that are the hallmark of a successful, thriving city. And I think air travel, we're working on that. Healthcare, clearly up there at the top. Shopping, and the list goes on and on. So I think that while I understand the need for seeing the Dells, I think that the growth of the city is going to dictate that there is quality health care for all of our citizens.
Thank
That's
you,
what I
sir.
think.
Any other comments before we vote?
Yeah, this is Stan Goligoski. I'd like to kind of talk about what my fellow commissioners are also kind of on the fence about. When I read through all the opposition letters, almost all of them did state that they do see a need for the hospital there. And the answer that we received, that if we were to really decrease the hospital or the patient towers by 2 stories, and that be a deal breaker, that really put me in favor of saying yes on this. So I just want to publicly state that, the views are important. I think we got as far south as we can get based off of the lot that they're looking at. And a majority of that dells you can view. I think from the road, now that we've cleared it, or they've cleared that area, you can see the dells even better now than when it was in the current state it was before they cleared it. So that's just my statement, and so everybody knows how I'll be voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Anybody else before we vote? Kaylee, why don't you go ahead and take the vote, please?
Okay. Ted Gambogi,
Yes.
George Lee,
Yes.
Thomas Hutchison,
Yes.
Stan Goligoski,
Yes.
Butch Tracy,
Yes.
Greg Lizelle,
No.
Don Michaelman.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-1 with Commissioner Lizelle voting against.
Greg, you want to give your specific reasons again, so this will go on the record when it goes to the city council?
Yeah, hold on, let me fix my phone. My phone is kind of messing up here. Okay. Again, it just goes back to when we did the annexation for the Deep Well Ranch. Anybody who moves into Saddlewood, any future development knew there's a place for a hospital there, there's a place for shopping, and they knew what they were buying when they bought their house. And again, I'm not against using your land, what you want to use it for, but these folks bought all their houses there, knew Embry-Riddle was there, knew where the airport was, and then just pop something up there this far out of town. If you buy downtown, you know there's tall buildings, and that's primarily my reason.
Thank you then. All right.
Mr. Chairman, just one point from staff. We have been very dedicated in trying to make sure that when there is a no vote, a minority vote on a council or on an action that ultimately ends up in front of council, we make sure we have that information in the staff report so council has a clear understanding of why the commissioners voted the way they did.
Good on that. Okay.
Thank you, George.
You're welcome.
Next item, any staff updates?
Brenda, you have any updates for us? I do not.
I would just mention that we will be having a meeting, a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at the end of the month on the 27th. It will be the Commission's initial look at the Arizona Eco Annexation Project, and you've all been provided some advanced information as provided by the applicant for your review, and we will be supplementing that information with additional details as they become available. But we look forward to connecting with you on meeting format, and we will be reaching out directly to the chair on some of the meeting management components, which will be important for this meeting. So thank you all for your willingness to get an advanced look at that project. There's going to be a lot to consider, and we look forward to coordinating it all for you at the end of the month.
And Bryn, we're going to be meeting in the city council chambers?
Yes, we are going to have the commission and staff and the applicant in council chambers. And we are going to provide the public participation component via Zoom. And we have elevated the capacity of our Zoom webinar account so that as many people as wish to attend may be on the Zoom at that time. And again, we are experiencing greater public participation as a result of this interface. So we think that it is a very positive way for the public to participate in spite of the current circumstances in public health.
Okay. Brent, could you touch on how the city council chambers have been changed?
Sure. Yes, city management undertook quite a modification to the council chambers, and each council seat has glass partition on either side of it to create sort of a little pod, if you will. Nothing overhead, of course, but each seat is divided by a glass partition, which enables the members of the commission to participate safely and to be able to do so without a mask if they choose to. And of course, staff and the applicant will be safely distanced out in the audience area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Then that will conclude this meeting on the 13th, and the commission is adjourned. Thank you for all attending.
Thank you.
Vernon, can I
Thank you, sir.